fait.
Oui, c'est fait.
Today is meeting 40 of the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development. This is a hybrid meeting today, and it's public. If you're in person, please keep earpieces away from the microphones to reduce the risk of injury from feedback incidents for our translators. Today, the committee is studying the main estimates for 2026-27. The House has referred to the committee the votes from the Canada Water Agency, Environment and Climate Change Canada, and the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada. And having previously agreed to follow up with the Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Nature regarding our study of industrial carbon pricing, the committee has this occasion today as well. I will interrupt the meeting a few minutes before adjournment so that the committee can vote on these estimates. And today we have the honor of having Honourable Julie DeBrusen, the Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Nature with us, who is accompanied by the following witnesses. We have Mark Fisher, President of the Canada Water Agency, Molly Johnson, Deputy Minister of the Department of Environment, Terence Hubbard, President of the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, and Andrew Campbell, Interim President and CEO of Parks Canada. So welcome everyone. Thank you for, am I missing someone? Go ahead.
Judy Meltzer, Associate ADM at Environment and Climate Change Canada.
Thank you and welcome to all. So as per usual, we will begin with a 5-minute opening statement from our Minister. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. It's great to see you here. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. I'm happy to be back to committee again to discuss now this time the 2026-2027 main estimates for Environment and Climate Change Canada and my portfolio Parks Canada, the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, and the Canada Water Agency. These main estimates are designed to protect what matters today and prepare for what comes next. That means continuing to take ambitious, inclusive, achievable action against climate change and delivering on a Force of Nature, Canada's strategy to protect nature announced earlier this spring, to protect biodiversity, ecosystems, and safeguarding the environment for Canadians across the country while making Canada stronger, safer, and more competitive. Because in today's world, climate action, careful stewardship, clean power, and competitive industries are not separate goals. They're interconnected. In my role, I remain firmly focused on building on practical and durable progress. Already, we've achieved an economy that's 34% less carbon intensive than it was in 2005. The most recent national inventory report shows emissions are continuing to decline, and we're continuing to move forward. We finalized methane regulations that will reduce emissions by 400 megatons. And we have secured an agreement to strengthen industrial carbon pricing with a clear price trajectory and ensuring that under the Canada-Alberta Agreement, the credit market in Alberta functions effectively to provide the certainty needed to accelerate investments in decarbonization. The clean fuel regulations are significantly reducing greenhouse gas emissions across the country and driving tens of billions of dollars in investments across Canada. The National Electricity Strategy will double the capacity of our grid by 2050 and supply clean, reliable, affordable power across the country for decades to come. It also includes a key commitment to retrofit up to 1 million homes. As energy costs rise, helping Canadians to switch off of oil and propane to cleaner and less costly forms of energy helps improve affordability. Nous faisons aussi des investissements dans les énergies renouvelables.
We are also investing in renewable energy, low-emission carbon, and carbon capture and storage, low-emission fuel, rather. Madam Chair, let me move on to the main estimates 2026-2027. Starting with Environment and Climate Change Canada, main estimates for 2026-2027 add up to roughly $1.71 billion, about $1.41 billion, or 45.3% less than the main estimates 2025-2026. This significant year-over-year decline seems larger than it is because some decisions on sunsetters will show up in future complementary estimates. The goal of our department remains clear, and we remain steadfast to have having a disciplined budgetary framework. Not only that, but we are continuing to improve climate and weather forecasting for Canadians.
Prevention and regulatory enforcement remain active across the country, and working with Indigenous communities remains a significant priority. For Parks Canada Agency, its 2026-2027 main estimates total $1.29 billion. That's representing a net increase of $25.5 million compared to the 2025-2026 main estimates. With this funding, Parks Canada will continue protecting, presenting, and managing Canada's existing national historic sites, national parks, heritage canals, national marine conservation areas, and one national urban park for the benefit and enjoyment of Canadians. It will also support Parks Canada's collaborative work to advance a new national urban parks, national parks, and national marine conservation areas while strengthening ecological corridors and protecting cultural landscapes. For the Impact Assessment Agency, its 2026-2027 main estimates total $109.5 million. With this funding, the agency will continue supporting timely impact assessments and decisions on major projects. It will advance one project, one review in collaborations with provinces and territories, and it will ensure meaningful partnership and engagement with Indigenous peoples, and it will protect the environment by mitigating or preventing adverse effects in federal jurisdiction. And finally, for the Canada Water Agency, its 2026-2027 main estimates total $81 million. This represents a decrease of $3.8 million, or 4.5%, compared to the 2025-2026 main estimates that totaled $84.8 million. With this funding, the agency will advance the development of Canada's first national water security strategy, the restoration and protection of nationally significant watersheds, and will continue to build a high-performing and regionally responsive organization headquartering in Winnipeg. So I'm going to stop there, Madam Chair, and I'm happy to take questions from members of the committee. Thank you. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Ministre. On va commencer avec notre question avec...
Thank you, Minister. We will begin our question and answer period with 6 minutes for Mr. Bexley of the Conservatives.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, colleagues, and welcome, Minister and witnesses. I appreciate your time and attendance today. Look forward to your responses. Minister de Bruzen, you're elected in Toronto Danforth on a arguably very environmental platform. So were you one of the 14 Liberal MPs that signed the letter to the Prime Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Bexley, for that question and recognizing the fact that my community does care deeply about environment and climate change, as I believe actually communities right across the country do. And I work with all of my colleagues and the Prime Minister.
My question, my time is, even though it's 6 minutes, my time is short, right? I'd appreciate if you could be direct.
Well, I'm repeating that I actually get to speak regularly with the Prime Minister directly about environment and climate change policy, to work on it directly with him. I know he cares, I care, and we're working very hard to continue the fight against climate change.
So you didn't sign the letter that is concerned about the direction of the government going?
I'm the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. I meet directly with the Prime Minister to work on environment and climate change matters. I don't believe I need to write him a letter. I talk with him directly.
Thank you very much. So Canadians are watching as a former minister, Liberal minister, has resigned, and while caucus members fight publicly over energy policy, why should workers in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Atlantic Canada trust a government that cannot agree, even within itself, on whether Canada's resource sector should even exist?
I'll be frank, I'm not even sure I fully understood that question, but if I pulled what I thought I understood from your question, let me be clear that our government recognizes the importance of our natural resource sector and all the opportunities that it has for our country, right across our country. So I'm...
You're very actively, over the last decade or more, have stymied any development or any work in this sector. I mean, keep it in the ground narrative is an absolute common theme within the Liberal background. So how can you give assurances to industry and citizens and the electorate in these parts of the country that depend on the energy industry and other extractive industries, including agriculture and fisheries, that their livelihood, which directly contributes, feeds, and supports the thriving of our economy, will remain viable, will thrive.
Our government has been very clear, in fact, that we are working with Canadians, for Canadians, to make sure that we're building a strong country for the future. That includes all types of projects, to be clear. It can be in the form of renewable energy, but when you look at the projects that are being referred to the Major Projects Office, it would include things like a graphite mine, the Nouveau Monde Graphite.
I'm sorry, Minister, but you're rehashing stuff that was announced almost more than half a decade ago. A couple of weeks ago, the Prime Minister signed an MOU appearing to support a new pipeline to the West Coast, and at the same time, increasing the industrial carbon tax is projected to cost my province alone, Alberta, tens of thousands of jobs over the next few years. But when your own caucus is confused about the government's contradictory directions, how can Albertans have confidence that you will act in their interest?
Actually, that's a really important question. So I want to be very clear. We are working collaboratively with all of the provinces, and we are working collaboratively to make sure that we are building a strong country together, because that's what Canadians want. They want to see that we have a strong, sovereign, secure country, and that only happens if we work collaboratively with the provinces and territories, and that is exactly what we're doing.
Pardon, Minister, but without a strong, thriving economy with a growing GDP that will support the aspirations of all the other programs, you're going to have none of it. What do you make of Cenovus' CEO John McKinsey's comments that capital has left Canada to find more competitive jurisdictions, and Canada has ceded high-paying jobs, taxes, and royalties to countries like Russia, Iraq, Iran, and the United States? You know, this is all based and predicated on liberal policies over the last decade or more that are still continuing on to this day.
I find it interesting that we're going back to where we've been at previous committees, which is I find it fascinating that the Conservative Party seems to be suggesting we should be taking investment notes from Russia, which is a country against which we have sanctions.
That's not at all what I said, Minister. I said, Minister, that that people and investment money is finding places like Russia and Iran and Iraq more attractive than Canada because of liberal policies. And how do you square that circle?
I will go back to, it sure sounds to me like the Conservative Party is suggesting that the best investment policies are
It's because of liberal policies over the last decade plus that has caused the capital to flee.
Foreign direct investment in Canada is up. We actually are doing very well, and I think that when you look at some of the most recent contracts, for example, in the construction of planes, you are seeing investment in our country that
second-tier industries that are not primary industries that we're talking about here today, revolving resource and extractive industries.
Excuse me, I beg you to tell those communities where those jobs are being created.
I'm not saying they're not important at all. Not even a little bit. I'm saying that's a secondary industry in the classic definition of primary, secondary, and tertiary industries. Primary industries generate new capital and new wealth. Everything else depends on that and is predicated on that. And liberal policies over the last 11 years plus have harmed that environment. Thank you very much, Chair, for the time. I appreciate it.
I will tell people in my home province of Ontario that the Conservative Party says that we have secondary industries as our main workforce. But
I would appreciate, go read your economics textbook.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bexty. We will turn now to Mr. Watchorn.
Thank you. You're on. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Minister for being here today and answering our questions. Moi, j'aimerais ça me tourner un petit peu vers la...
I would like to talk a little bit about the nature strategy today, Minister. We made a great announcement alongside Secretary of State Provost. We will be protecting 300 hectares in my community in perpetuity, and this is all thanks to cooperation between the federal government, the provincial government, municipalities, and private capital. The federal government contributed $1.4 billion to protect a beautiful park for people in my region who will be able to have access to nature. Could you talk about how all three levels of government can work together in order to meet our nature protection goals? Thank you for that question. As you noted, the protection of nature is highly important for Canadians in all of our communities. It's something that improves quality of life, and especially in the Laurentians, it's something that is good for the economy as well. We will continue to protect nature through our nature strategy. As you noted, we have 3 levels of we have a tripartite strategy. One part of our strategy is nature protection. We have committed to create new parks, but we should also recognize the work done by Canadians to protect active land. And to give an example, and I forget the word in French, but ranchers on grasslands. Maybe someone translated that for me. Here we're talking about land in active use, which is at the same time being protected. We hope to do other examples like that and also recognize the work already done. So that's one part of our 3-part strategy. The second part of our strategy is major projects that allow us to protect nature at the same time. And here, what we plan to do is, I can't find the right word. We will be mapping out areas with the greatest biodiversity, habitats of endangered species, and we'll try to figure out how to identify more carbon-rich areas. Through that, when someone proposes a major project, we can identify areas where it will be harder to get permits. And we'll be able to say, it might be harder to get a permit here, but you could consider this other area over here. In doing so, we will give information to people, project proponents, from the get-go when they need it. The third part of our strategy is to secure more private investment as we seek to protect nature. If you look at our record so far in the Northwest Territories last summer, there was a project for permanence, PFP, aimed at protecting 2% of Canada's land area, 30% of the Northwest Territories. And federal funds will go into this, certainly, but there will also be funding from from charities in the corporate sector. And we hope to continue along the same path. When we forge the right partnerships, our federal spending can generate private spending, which can then be put to the protection of nature. There are other things that I think are important to mention, especially for people in coastal communities. We know that there's a lot of plastic that is used in the fishing industry for catching fish, and that creates an issue with ghost gear. In the nature strategy, we are investing in ghost gear recovery so that it does not remain in the oceans. And pardon my Franglish, but I should also talk about ratifying the High Seas Treaty. That's something important at the international level for ocean protection. Some things that we are doing are not very much talked about, but they're still important. Thank you very much. I should have mentioned this, but I'm actually sharing my time with Mr. Grant, so I'll pass it over to him.
I just want, echoing, sorry. I would just like to follow up. I know I don't have much time, but you're talking about the nature strategy, and I just wanted to know how you can explain how this is going to advance our 30 by 30 commitments and how it's going to benefit future generations as well.
Thank you. So and it's specifically mostly in Pillar 1 that you find this? but also in Pillar 3. So it's about how do we set up protections for nature, including the recognition of OECMs, which is active working areas that are also being protected. I used the example when I was talking with Mr. Watchorn of ranch lands, like ranchers protecting grasslands. So that is an important piece of it. It is also about how do we mobilize more private funds to help, with public dollars to motivate more private investments. We have a great example in the Kootenays where we protected a grizzly bear habitat that included the province of British Columbia, the local First Nation, the federal government, but also private investments. And when we do that, we get to use our public dollars to advance further.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to Monsieur Bonin pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, thank you for being here today. We are witnessing the worst climate backsliding ever seen in Canada's history. A number of people have noted this, including the member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie, who described your government as worse than the Harper government. Yesterday, he left politics permanently. The member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie is a former environment minister, and he has talked about serious climate backsliding. Do you agree with him? Just to start off, if we're talking about the member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie, I was his parliamentary secretary for 6 years, but do you agree with him? I was just saying that I have a great respect for his work. I wanted to say that right off the bat. Now, thank you for your question, because it gives me an opportunity to talk about what we have done. Minister, we don't have a lot of time, and I asked you whether you agree with him. Do you agree that we are witnessing a serious climate backsliding and that much of your climate strategy has been dismantled over the past year? And I was answering you. I was going to say that we are doing a lot to advance the fight against climate change. And I think that's worth noting. It's important. It's important for Canadians to hear this. Minister, for a year now, you have been saying that Canada is doing more to fight climate change. The former environment minister has said the exact opposite. And yet you are insisting that we are doing more than before. Do you have any numbers to support this? To support the fact that your current plan will lead to less greenhouse gas emissions despite it being a dismantlement of the previous plan? We are there for our country. We are there for the world. We are ready to meet the moment. And if you want numbers, our methane regulations put in place in December. No, hey, you asked for numbers. These are regulations over the oil sector that, Minister, you are the environment minister. You are in charge of fighting climate change. I have asked you a simple question. It's important to have a general overview and not be lost in details. Do you have numbers proving that we are more likely than we were a year ago to meet our climate targets? According to the Climate Institute of Canada, you will not reach net zero by 2050. Stakeholders have said that because of the MOU, 230 million tons of carbon will be emitted. Do you have numbers that prove that you are actually moving forward when it comes to the fight against climate change instead of backsliding? Maybe your officials have numbers. Does someone have numbers they can present to me? I was going to give you a number regarding the methane regulations. Yes, but overall numbers, Minister. Well, if you keep interrupting me, I won't be able to answer you, will I? Go ahead and answer. I'm not asking for methane numbers, I'm asking for overall numbers. methane is one of the largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions. And that's an area where we have seen major advancements. So I think that's worth mentioning. But I can talk about anything you want. Overall numbers, then. I want to hear overall numbers. It's a simple question. I don't know if the interpretation has an issue here, but I'm asking for overall numbers. The overall performance of Canada's climate plan, the whole plan. Do you have something that you can tell me? Oh, I think I understood you. What I'm saying is that we are progressing. We released a plan in December. We also unveiled our national inventory in April. These are the most up-to-date figures. And we will continue to do our forecasting. The most up-to-date numbers are those which we have released. So you have no new numbers. You've been making announcements for a year now, and yet you have no actual numbers stating Canada's position in the fight against climate change. I gave you numbers. There were numbers released in April 2026 through our inventory. You have the inventory. The inventory goes back to 2024. I'm talking about your action plan. You have done nothing to evaluate all of the lifting of regulations that you have been doing since the new government took power. I talked to you about the regulations and what we're doing. Our numbers are public. The most recent available numbers are those published in April. Thank you very much, Mr. Bonin.
5 minutes.
Thank you, Minister, for appearing. Minister, as you know, I often talk about in the House government spending and its relation to inflation. It's something I hear a lot in my riding, very important to the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. Now, recently, our office received the breakdown on costs. You were a signatory on this document, so I would assume that you have knowledge of it. With respect to the Canadian Pavilion and the government's participation at COP30 held in Brazil, you attended this conference and you were responsible for the expenditures. So the tabled response shows that your department spent over $467,000 on accommodations. Now, when we drill down into this itemized list, your delegation stayed in a private 3-bedroom luxury accommodations that costed taxpayers roughly $28,000 per unit for a 2-week stay. Now, the average Airbnb in this area is about $70 a night, 980 Canadian dollars. So I'm just curious why the luxury accommodations were chosen over standard, more cost-effective options.
If we're going to compare apples to apples, I would have done the search of what the cost of accommodations were during COP, and they were certainly not $70 a day during COP. And the accommodations were actually people sharing accommodations. So trying to be very much as cost effective as possible. And,
so that was a reasonable, you feel like that was a reasonable amount to pay during this period of time? Okay, well, that's fine. If that's the answer, that's fine. I mean, I don't know if Canadians would agree. But in addition to that, there were 2 private rentals that cost $1,724 and $1,313 per night, respectively. I mean, that, by Canadians' terms, is a mortgage payment. So is that also a responsible use of funds for accommodations?
Every effort was made to find the most cost-effective accommodations during that time, and you can very well look, the accommodations were very tight during COP. It is important that we have a presence at COP, and it was important to have us there representing Canada. So
it's the cost associated, though, that I'm asking about, Minister.
But we needed, but I just want to be clear, because I want to clarify your numbers. You can compare what accommodation would cost in that city today. That is not the same thing as what it cost during COP, because of the number of people who are going to a very much smaller city. So just wanted to be clear that that was the accommodation we did everything to ensure.
Thank
that
you,
we were
Minister. I just wanted to ask a couple of other questions around that. Now, your response also shows that the government awarded a $433,000 sole source contract to a company called DMDL for space design and furnishing. So can you explain why a competitive process wasn't used for a project that was planned months in advance?
I can follow up with that, but I will also say that when it came to the having a space at COP, which is important and has a real chance for engagement between industry, NGOs, and people from different governments as well.
Get back to me on why it was a sole source contract that was picked?
We'll get you the details for that.
So you spent $310,000, nearly half the total cost, on event management support through a company called MCI. So just curious, why does your department need to pay an additional $300,000 to gather event proposals when you have an entire department of public servants capable of managing the schedule?
We are happy to get back to you with the details on each of these elements.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so given the affordability crisis that Canadians are facing right now, certainly that we would argue that the Liberals have created, how can you justify spending $1 million when Canadians are depending on food banks to eat? Like in long-range mountains, that money could have been used towards projects that protect communities, improve local infrastructure, and deliver tangible benefits to residents instead of funding luxury travel to Brazil. So I'm just going to ask you, do you feel this was a responsible expenditure of taxpayer dollars?
I will say two pieces. I think it is important that we are at COP, and I will point out that I traveled economy. So if you're at the luxury travel piece, may be overstated. But I do want to say what we are doing to support people in long-range mountain. We want to talk about the Canada Child Benefit. By the way, the Conservatives were giving $100 to each family, whether they were wealthy or not, and that was taxed. Our Canada Child Benefit is actually indexed to inflation and tax-free. That's going to families in long-range mountain.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to Mr. Millett for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Minister, bringing us back to more substantive matters, Canada's 2030 nature strategy commits to reversing biodiversity loss, including through Target 6, as I believe you're familiar, on invasive alien species, which calls for stronger prevention, early detection, control, and eradication efforts. In communities, including those such as mine along the Bay of Quinte and the Trent Severn Waterway, organizations, Madam Chair, like Quinte Conservation, or Minister, sorry, are increasingly concerned about invasive aquatic plants such as water soldier, which threaten native ecosystems, recreational waterways, and local biodiversity. Minister, can you tell me what role the federal government is playing in coordinating invasive species management with provincial and local partners? And will additional rapid response supports be made available to help communities contain and eradicate these threats before they spread further?
Thank you for that question. And I know that that is something that is very important to communities across our country. I know that I have joined community members in Toronto as we've gone out and tried to curtail the growth of invasive species. And also, as an example, we have worked with, for example, the Toronto Region Conservation Authority and many biospheres on reducing the expansion of Phragmites, for example, and dealing with those kinds of invasive species. So I know that that's something that's important to communities. And we do work with local organizations to deliver those types of programs. Like I used as the examples, I've seen it with local biospheres, Long Point Biosphere being one example that comes to mind, where they were working directly on Phragmites prevention. I know that there are also in your general region, like with Frontenac Arches and the like, you have biospheres that do some important work. But also working with local organizations, like I said, a lot of the hands-on work in these kind of spaces, and we really should shout that out. is done by community organizations who know on the ground how to do this work. So we do absolutely continue with those partnerships. One of the most important parts of all of the work that we do on nature protection and on environment is in the area of partnership with provinces, partnerships with municipalities, but also partnerships with organizations on the ground. So we absolutely continue with that work. It's important work in protecting the biodiversity.
Minister, further to that, and actually in line with your response, the Bay of Quinte has seen decades of work, including that with the Bay of Quinte Remedial Action Plan, which was instrumental in helping to remove the Bay of Quinte, or almost delist it from one of the 5 areas of concern around the Great Lakes. It was in a bad state just a few short decades ago. So they've been working to improve water quality and the general ecosystem health, which of course benefits all of our communities. So can you quickly tell me how the federal government is ensuring the nature strategy complements ongoing freshwater protection efforts in the Great Lakes and connected waterways in particular, like the Trent Severn system?
Thank you. Actually, I just looked over because it's kind of funny. I have 2 people at the end of my table here who do some of that direct work. And look, tribute to Canada Water Agency celebrates 1 year of existence, working and doing important work on the Great Lakes, but not just the Great Lakes, but in the Great Lakes area specifically. And President Mark Fisher here from Canada Water Agency is working on a national water security strategy as well as part of the work through the Canada Water Agency. I think they've shown amazing leadership in that space. But if you're talking about the Trent Severn waterways, Parks Canada also plays an important role, and working with communities to make sure that we're protecting those spaces. Again, I just really want to highlight this is work by agencies, federal agencies, but always working very much in partnership with Indigenous nations, local communities, and our provinces to make sure that we get it right.
Thank you, Minister. And I may go a little farther in the second hour with Mr. Fisher and other officials. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Millett. Maintenant, on tourne à Monsieur Bonin pour...
We'll now hand it over to Mr. Bonin for 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. The Environment Commissioner has said that Canada has, since 1990, the worst environmental performance in the G7. Now we see that Canada is still at the bottom of the G7. We're at the bottom ranks of the OECD. Can you name a country that is doing? Can you name a G7 country that is doing worse when it comes to meeting its climate change goals than Canada is? I'm happy you talked about the G7 because I was actually at the G7 summit in Paris about a month ago. And what I heard from other G7 members is that we are leaders. And okay, so who is doing worse than Canada if we're such great leaders? Well, what I'd like to say is that because we're leaders, I don't want to point the finger at other countries that are not doing so well. We're leaders when it comes to methane, when it comes to... Okay, I'm asking a question. If you don't want to answer, we'll move on. Leadership means leadership. It means that we're in the lead. You talk about pipelines and gas and LNG, but you never answer this one question, which is that we have a nature strategy. How much carbon gas emissions will be avoided thanks to the nature strategy? Well, I disagree with the premise of that question. I don't even know how to answer that. We are working to reduce emissions. We're doing all sorts of things. If you would listen to what I'm telling you, how much GHGs will not be emitted thanks to your nature strategy? How much greenhouse gas emissions? We are still working on our analyses. The greatest emissions reduction will come from our electricity strategy. Our electricity strategy will... And what about the nature strategy? Well, the electricity strategy is where we will secure major emissions reductions. That's how we will do it, through doubling our electrical grid, working with Hydro-Quebec. So maybe your nature strategy will have zero impact in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Thank you, Mr. Bonin.
Leslie for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, do you believe that any decisions you have made as Minister of the Environment led to, or at least contributed to, the high-profile resignation of former Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault?
I believe that the work that our government is doing is very important in protecting nature and fighting climate change. I cannot speak
Thought about this? You haven't thought about, like, what if maybe we did things different since I became minister? We wouldn't be losing a member of our caucus.
What I would say is, again, like I said at the beginning, I worked directly with Stephen Guilbeault for many years as his parliamentary secretary, have tremendous respect for him and the work that he has done.
Did he ever come to you before he resigned and said, this is going to happen if you don't change course, Minister?
Look, I'm not going to speak for Stephen Guilbeault. I think that he can answer the questions well on his own for his decisions. But if you want to ask about the work that I am doing, I am happy to do that.
I'd love to talk about the consultation paper proposing changes to Canada's project approval process. Now, my first question is, there's legislation coming at some point. I'm curious if you have a date as to when that could be expected. Is it going to be before summer? Is it going to be in the fall? Is it going to be in 2027? And before it's tabled, will you commit to allowing Parliament to do its job and fully review that legislation and not use time allocation to push it through when it does come?
Well, I'm glad that you pointed out that it's open for consultation right now. I think that's very important that Canadians have a say. So, I would make sure that everyone in communities knows that this is happening, that the consultation is there. There will be legislation following consultations. I don't have a date because we're in consultations right now.
Time allocation. Are you planning on time allocating when the time comes, or will you commit today to not doing that and let Parliament do its job?
Several steps ahead. We are in consultations right now about the regulatory efficiency. I think it's a very...
We were supposed to move with unimaginable speed, so I suspect you're going to want to time allocate such legislation. Now, but realistically, for years, your government defended Bill C-69 to the umpth degree, and now you're choosing to rewrite it again. Is that not an admission that Bill C-69 was an absolute unmitigated failure?
Let me be clear that the Impact Assessment Agency has done very important work, including regional assessments, by the way, which are sought after as a way of how we can make sure that we understand cumulative impacts of projects so that we can create economic zones and do the work. And actually, Newfoundland and Labrador is a great example of where we did through the Impact Assessment Agency.
In the consultation paper, I'm from Manitoba, so it's just a little less relevant to me. In the consultation paper, it states that, quote, federal laws have rules that can make regulatory processes slow, end quote. Since you helped write it, what specific rules did you support that have made it slow to build pipelines and mines in this country?
If we want to talk about slow, the assessment that was set up in the Harper years was actually the slowest.
What a deflection! What a deflection, Minister. Let's focus on now. You wrote the rules. You've been in government for 10 years. Your discussion paper says that, quote, federal laws have rules that can make regulatory processes slow. I'm asking, what are those rules? You've clearly identified them. You put them in place. What are they?
What I'm actually telling you is that we are still reviewing projects under the Harper years.
You mean Stephen Harper? What year is it?
If you want to talk about...
What year is it, Minister? Okay, I'm gonna transition over to something that maybe you'll have some answers for. Your department is cutting the radar research program needed to support Canada's $180 million radar network. What is the total cost savings to your department for that cut?
So I want to begin when we're talking about the services through weather radar about how we're actually we're modernizing the systems using hybrid models so that we can actually deliver better services. So whether that is actually going to help with predictions and weather predictions.
We're hearing experts, we're hearing external experts, like Jenny Hagan, a severe weather expert. So she says that these cuts will hold back the very information Canadians rely on to protect themselves, their families, and the public during severe weather. Is she wrong, or is Dr. David Stills wrong, that one of the leading severe weather scientists that warned the gutting of this is going to be a severe problem for measuring and warnings for tornadoes, hail, flash floods, and other dangerous storms? Are they wrong and you're right?
What I'm saying is that science and the radar science remains fundamental to the work that we're doing in meteorology, and that we have as a priority to make sure
personally
that Canadians...
guarantee, Minister, will you personally guarantee that there will be no impact on tornado detection, hail detection, flash flood warnings, blizzard warnings, or severe storm warnings due to these cuts? Will you guarantee that as Minister?
I will absolutely say that we have been improving our warning systems and, in fact, increasing funds to our national alert system for Canadians.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leslie. We'll now turn to Monsieur Saint-Pierre pour 5 minutes.
Thank you. Welcome again, Mr. Debrusin. You've been incredibly generous with your time. We know that energy efficiency should be our first fuel, and the best energy is the one we don't use. According to Efficiency Canada, as we aim to double our electricity grid by 2050, the energy we save from implementing energy efficiency measures could account for more than 40% of Canada's energy needs by 2050 if we start prioritizing policies to improve energy efficiency. Energy efficiency also saves Canadians money on their energy bills. It creates 500,000 Canadian jobs, recirculates money in all of our Canadian ridings, reduces pollution, and increases our sovereignty. Frankly speaking, I know that the Bloc is supportive of energy efficiency, and I'm a little shocked that the Conservatives are not even stronger advocates of energy efficiency. It really boggles my mind. So I'm curious, Minister, can you share with us the details of our government's latest electricity strategy and the plan to retrofit 1 million Canadian homes?
Thank you. And that is really important because, as you mentioned, energy efficiency is good for affordability and good for the environment. It's one of the strongest double wins, if I could name one. And what we have in the electricity strategy is a commitment to help retrofit up to 1 million homes. That's in a consultation as to exactly how it rolls out, but one of the important parts is expansion of the oil to heat pump program to also allow for people who rely on propane and electric baseboard heating to be able to have access to that program. We know that that will actually expand coverage across our country and help Canadians to reduce their energy bills. In fact, when we look at the electricity strategy as a whole, we anticipate that 70% of Canadians will see their energy bill, we call it energy wallet, but really it's energy savings. They will see reductions in their energy costs because of this electricity strategy. If I can add, though, just because one piece that I don't think, it's a visual thing, but I was out for the announcement just last week in coastal BC for the creation of a National Marine Conservation Area Reserve. I was in a small town up there. There were heat pumps. There were heat pumps on those homes, right? Those are the kinds of things where people see that it is supporting energy efficiency, supporting the protection of the environment. I'll notice it very boldly, too, when I go to Atlantic Canada, quite frankly. The oil-to-heat pump program has had a very massive impact in switching people over to a form that's going to reduce their energy bills.
Great. Thank you, Minister. I'll pass the rest of my time to my colleague, Bruce Vanjoy.
Thank you, Minister. I'd also like to talk about the electricity strategy. I think we've got a great news story here. The sector has reduced greenhouse gas emissions very substantially, and the wins are not just about increasing affordability and achieving climate objectives, but also growing the economy, high quality new jobs for Canadians and improving competitiveness of our industries. Could you please elaborate on some of those additional benefits of the good work that we're doing in electricity? Thanks.
Thank you. one of the proudest parts, if I can, there were many when we put out this electricity strategy, was the fact that we were able to stand alongside leaders from, electrical workers, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, recognizing that electricity strategy also means good union jobs, good paying careers in building our electricity grid. We have in our spring economic update additional supports to actually not just help with people getting the training to get Red Seal trades, but to help them through the apprenticeships, and also on completion of the apprenticeship, helping Canadians right through the process to actually be able to get certification so that they can be part of building Canada and getting these good paying jobs. So it's a really important part of the entire project. We have these, we're in this important moment for our country. We're going to double our electrical grid. At the same time, it creates great paying jobs, and Canadians get to be part of building this important infrastructure for our country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fanjoy. We still have 9 minutes remaining, so proposal for 2.5 minutes per party for a quick third round. If there is no objection, that's how we'll proceed. 3 minutes per? Yeah, I have 11:51. Okay, we'll do 3 minutes per party, and we'll start with Mr. Ross.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the Minister. The news so far is major project development in terms of fast tracking and even pre-approval. But in terms of the actual environmental certificate that will be issued for a major project, which agency will be issuing the certificate?
Well, there are different. It depends on how a project moves forward, so through the system.
But so let's be more specific then. So say it's designated under the Major Projects Office for fast approval or pre-approval. Will the Major Projects Office issue the environmental certificate?
It actually remains a government decision. So
the Canadian Impact Assessment Agency will issue the certificate.
So for those projects that are designated under Bill C-5, it would be the Minister of One Canadian Economy that would issue those decision statements.
That's not the Environment Minister?
Minister LeBlanc.
So will it have any tie-in to your ministry?
I provide advice as to part of these decisions.
And so in that respect then, your ministry will not basically be the lead in environmental assessments. You will provide the assistance, and that'll be it.
That's actually incorrect. We do the environmental assessments, so that remains absolutely part of the work that we do.
But you will not issue the certificate to the Building Canada.
The environmental assessment. So that's how, by the way, it works even today. We provide the environmental assessment.
I understand that, but the Major Projects Office for pre-approval or fast approval, they'll be the lead, but then it won't be your ministry that will issue the certificate.
Maybe take one step back, which is even as a way of what we're doing and the work that's happening through the Impact Assessment Agency, for example, is through cooperation agreements, which is where the vast majority of projects will be. We have cooperation agreements with almost all of the provinces now. It's one project, one review.
No, I'm not talking about the cooperation. I'm talking about the ministry responsibilities. That's well laid out already in legislation and regulation. And everybody understands currently is the Canadian Impact Assessment Agency that takes the lead and issues a certificate. But right now, I'm seeing this turning into a three-headed beast. You talk about the Major Projects Office being the designated agency to fast track or pre-approve, but then there's a different ministry that will issue the certificate. So my understanding now is that the Major Projects Office will take the lead, but they will use the resources that are currently there under the Canadian Impact Assessment Agency for the resources to assess a major project for fast approval.
I just don't fully agree with how you've set that out. I see that our time is up, but what I will just say quickly, first of all, most projects are actually going to be under the cooperation agreements we've set up with provinces. But for the ones that do get referred to the major projects office, there is a process. I don't agree with you exactly as how do you set it out. We provide the environmental assessments, and we will have a rigorous process to make sure that the environmental process and regulations are actually fully reviewed and accorded with.
To the certificate.
Sorry, time is up, Mr. Ross. We will now go to Mr. Greaves for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, colleagues. Thank you for joining us today, Minister. It's a pleasure to have you with us, though I am sorry that our meeting today has started with questions from our Conservative colleagues opposite that are, to put it mildly, factually challenged and more or less pretend that the province of British Columbia doesn't exist and hasn't benefited from enormous investments in the resource sector over the last 10 years. As you're well aware, Canadians across the country supported the public acquisition and construction of a $35 billion pipeline to support the Alberta energy sector. We've seen the largest private sector investment in Canadian history in LNG Canada, which is now moving towards phase 2. Frankly, the members opposite shouldn't need any reminding from me about the LNG that BC has been developing over the last decade. So it's frustrating to have this be the context of your meeting when it's very clear that British Columbia has helped lead the country in the last 10 years in terms of building out our natural resource and energy sectors. Having said all that, it's also true that the government is clearly committed towards helping to preserve and conserve our incredible natural environment in British Columbia. And just recently, members of your team, representing the Government of Canada, along with the Government of British Columbia and Coastal First Nations, announced an historic milestone to establish a National Marine Conservation Area Reserve on the BC coast. This is an incredibly exciting announcement as we move towards our 30 by 30 targets for conservation in this country. I'm wondering if you could please speak to how this new agreement and the conservation area will help to protect Pacific salmon and help to support our coastal economies and coastal ecologies going forward.
Thank you for that question. The signature we got to do just last week in Clem2 for the National Marine Conservation Area Reserve was a really important moment for our country and for the province of British Columbia. Just for everyone just to know, this was an agreement that was signed between 6 coastal First Nations, province of British Columbia, and the federal government, all working together in this reserve. And it is very important because it will be helping with the protection of whales and many different kinds of fish, in fact, as well as with other wildlife. Also, to just be clear, though, there will be continued ability for commercial and recreational fishing in the National Marine Conservation Area Reserve. So they will go hand in hand. What we will see is sustainable fishing in that area. And that's really important because I know it's important as a way of life to the coastal economy. So we're seeing both work very much hand in hand. And I think that it was actually a very beautiful moment to see how we can all come together to do great things. Just last thing, I know my time is up, but I just do want to reiterate just the size because it's so massive. It's 1.5 times the size of Banff National Park. It's larger than the size of Prince Edward Island, the area that was protected.
Thank you very much, Mr. Greaves. Maintenant pour Monsieur Bonin.
Madame la ministre, il y a un...
Minister, you have a quote-unquote environmental committee made up of Liberal MPs. How many times have you met with this Environment Caucus? I think you're talking about caucuses instead of committees there. As you know, caucus issues are confidential, but I will say that I work with all of my colleagues and all MPs. I would also note that our party cares deeply about continuing to fight against climate change and protect the environment. But it's nothing caucus confidential. It was printed in the Journal de Montréal. Has this committee made recommendations? As I noted, what you are referring to is a caucus. Committees are like what we are doing right now. I cannot talk about caucus issues, but I can say that all of us are working closely together. The proposed assessment regime would exempt pipelines and major projects from impact assessments. It would also create economic zones where projects would be approved prior to an environmental assessment. Construction could even get started prior to an assessment being completed. Is there any other developed country you could name with a regime like that? Here, I'm not quite sure how to phrase this, but we're carrying out mapping to identify areas. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about approvals prior to the assessment. Is there any other developed country with a regime like that? I'm talking about all the various things we are proposing. We're proposing certain regulatory changes. Consultations are still ongoing. And there are a number of different countries. And okay, which ones? I was getting there. We're consulting on a number of different things, but other countries like Great Britain do similar things. So in the UK, you can start building a pipeline before an impact assessment is carried out. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there are a number of different measures as we seek to amend our regulations. We are carrying out consultations, and other countries share some of the measures that we're proposing. But you can't name a country that would give a green light to construction. Or could you name a country, please, that gives... We are out of time.
These are our colleagues, so I'd like to very much thank the Minister and the witnesses for their time today. I will briefly suspend so we can switch over to the next set of witnesses. Thank you very much. Going to recommence, please, for our second hour on the main estimates. If everyone could please quiet down and take their seats. Much appreciated. I'd like to begin by welcoming our witnesses. We have many a witness today on the main estimates. From the Canada Water Agency, we have Mark Fisher, Gemma Bogue, and Carmel Barnaby is online with us. From the Department of Environment, we have Molly Johnson, Judy Meltzer, Kurt Chin Kui, Alison McDermott, Tara Shannon, Cecile Siu. From the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, we have Terrence Hubbard, Patricia Brady, Charles Vigneault, and Bram Seppers. And from Parks Canada Agency, we have Andrew Campbell and Andrew Francis. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for spending time with us today. We will go directly into our line of questioning, and we will begin with Ms. Anstey for 6 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you to all the witnesses for appearing. I know the officials are following up with some information in relation to my previous line of questioning, so I just wanted to follow up with a couple of other things. In the response, the travel costs are still being reviewed for compliance and still subject to reconciliation. So it's been 6 months now. November 2025 was when the conference happened. So is there a chance that these costs will exceed $1.1 million?
I apologize. I don't have those details. We'll have to confirm with you.
Okay, so can you table those expenses with us, the final expenses with the committee?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask some further questions now to Parks Canada. As you know, I have large park in my riding. I did have some questions for you previously when you appeared with respect to ATV access within the park. We've done a considerable amount of work on this file since we've met with the municipality as well as parks officials, and we've kind of come to a standstill. And one of the things that often happens within the communications is it's sort of like a circular conversation. It just keeps going. We don't actually get anywhere in terms of a solution. Currently, the proposal that we've been discussing is that the RCMP on this 1.3 section of road, 1.3 kilometer section of road, do not issue tickets for ATV use. And so we're wondering if the park wardens would follow the RCMP's decision on that and also allow the ATV use in this section of the park.
So a very specific question, Madam Chair. We will certainly get back on the response on that. I know that the last time that I was talking to the superintendent around this item, we were also looking for the provincial minister of transport, or Ministry of Transport, not minister, to weigh in as well, just along ATV use on the road as well.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to follow up because you gave your commitment and you said you were very familiar with the park.
I am familiar with the park.
Thank you.
And the $7.2 million we're investing on the road just announced yesterday as well. So.
Also, we talked about the spruce budworm, and you were going to give us a little bit more information with respect to how much deadwood was in the park. We have constituents asking, with respect to communities that are directly in the park, if they will be able to go in, get this deadwood, and use it for firewood.
So, as you know, there is a agreement with residents in the area to be able to do firewood and some forest thinning in the area. We are looking at how we can extend that as well. So, there are those discussions underway. Certainly, we will get back to you as we conclude those.
Okay, so you'll follow up with me. Okay, that's great. I also have a question with respect to a road that's been cut off for residents to use within the community of Port au Choix. It's Barbase Road. It's an area where residents like to go out and spend time out there in their vehicles, and some of the seniors talk about being able to access it as they did for many years. And currently, right now, they aren't allowed to have any access in this area. So I'm just curious if this is something that we can also look at.
Yeah, I'll need to get back to you on that one. Always public safety and health comes first in all the decision making that we have. So if there was some reason that we weren't having it open at this moment, obviously, as you know, there were affected areas in the area from the previous storms, and I know some of the roads had deteriorated in that area. Don't know for a fact that it's this one, but we will get back to you with that information.
Okay, great. And the other thing that I get asked a lot about are the opening and closing dates of Parks Canada, and I guess this would probably apply nationally as well. But as you know, our area depends heavily from a tourism perspective, and we have stakeholders, multiple stakeholders, reaching out to the office on a regular basis with respect to they come to see the icebergs, and those often are there much earlier than the park is opened. And so we're curious if there is discussions or if there is any way to extend these dates so that we can maximize on the amount of people that we can bring into the park.
Short answer, please. Time is up.
Yeah, so Grossmore National Park, of course, is open access all the time. It's some of the other facilities that we would have, and from a facilities perspective, we try and do it when we have the most number of visitors, and if there is visitation changes, as we've seen in some other parks, we will make hours and seasonal changes based on that. So,
yep. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. We'll now turn to Monsieur Saint-Pierre pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mrs. Chair. I find this obsession by the Conservatives on costs to be fascinating. It raises a question or makes me wonder how much it costs to fly MPs from Newfoundland or Manitoba or Alberta to Ottawa every week. Or I think of Poilievre's Stornoway residence when he wasn't even leader or he wasn't even an MP. So anyways, I'll start talking about real issues instead of focusing on distractions. Je vais aussi partager mon temps avec mon...
I will be sharing my time with my colleague, Bruce Fanjoy.
My colleague, Bruce. Puis je vais procéder en français.
I will be asking my questions in French. I have a question for Molly Johnson. Are there concrete tools our government could put in place through the national electrification strategy? I know there are clean energy subsidies. Could you talk about these tools, and will they bring down emissions while improving Canada's sovereignty and from the United States?
Thanks very much, and thanks for the question, and thank you for not embarrassing me too much when I dumped water all over my colleague. And so, great start for the day. I think there's a lot of things as we look at our opportunity to move forward as we build Canada, and electrification is going to be critically important. There are the regulatory tools that we have, but then there's thinking about what is going to incentivize people to build more, to make energy more affordable for Canadians. So the first thing is about building the energy infrastructure in place and across Canada, so that Canadians and businesses have access to more clean, low-cost energy. So let's talk about, small modular reactors, talk about interties, talk about a number of those big sort of infrastructure pieces. That doesn't happen on its own. It happens in partnership between different jurisdictions, and that's been a big focus of the work that's been happening. It also happens because businesses decide to make those decisions. And so the big suite of measures and investments that have been happening, the investment tax credits for electricity and a number of those other pieces, ensuring that Canada has the right corporate tax rate in place to incentivize direct investment, like those are all part of the big package that are going to get people to move. The other part of the equation as well is like what is going to help consumers get to where they need to get in order to make the choices to connect to a clean electricity and a clean energy system. So when we think about that, there is, the approach to ensuring that there are more zero-emission vehicles, because we want to have the clean electricity system that people plug into and then drive clean electric vehicles. Same thing on retrofits. Retrofits are about what the house looks like, how it is plugged into an energy system, but equally what the envelope looks like so that we have the right kind of energy system as well. So it all kind of comes together into a suite, and it's structural. And I guess my hope is that we look at all of these measures together. It's, sort of what sets the baseline rule, but also what are the things that we're building together to get us to that next step.
Great, thank you. I'll pass my time on to my colleague, Bruce.
Yes, thank you. My question is for Mr. Fisher from the Water Agency. Canada is blessed with so much water. One of the challenges is that it's not always in the right place at the right time. We experience droughts, and we also experience floods as a result of extreme weather events and climate change. Can you talk to us a bit about how Canada's Water Agency is helping to prepare Canadians for greater resilience with respect to our water?
Great. Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for the question. It's a good one. It is true that many Canadians look at Canada as a water abundant country, but there is a different story. 60% of the fresh water that we do have that's available flows north away from 80% of the population. And as you indicated, there are certainly regional differences in terms of water availability and water quality. So front and center in the Canada Water Agency's work is first and foremost is working with provinces and territories, Indigenous partners, and local groups to restore and protect nationally significant and regionally significant freshwater ecosystems. But also through our policy work, we're also working on and committed to developing Canada's first national water security strategy, which for us will really allow us to look at those more variable and uncertain futures and making sure that both the federal government but also many partners have an eye on that future and how do we have the right policies and programs in place to make sure, to your point, that we have sufficient water available where we need it and in the quality that we need it in to service a variety of ecological needs but also socioeconomic needs.
Okay. Thank you. And just the water security strategy, will that obviously that will talk to having water where we need it. What about flood risk management? Is that within scope or not?
Again, thank you for the question. I know earlier in the week there was a robust debate and discussion on C-241, and obviously it's a bill that hasn't passed the House yet, but we know that's certainly an issue that's top of mind for Canadians. I think as we develop the National Water Security Strategy with many partners, floods and droughts and other issues will come up in that context, and we certainly see an opportunity for synergy between those strategies if that bill is passed, and so we look forward to having that discussion in more detail and depending on where that bill goes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Fanjoy, maintenant je tourne à...
We will now turn it over to Mr. Bonin for 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Yesterday, my colleague from Honoré Mercier was quoted in Le Devoir. He said he wanted more data before concluding that Canada will miss its greenhouse gas reduction targets. But when I look at your 2025 emissions reductions plan, it shows reductions of 21 to 28% by 2030, far from our target of 40 to 45%. Could it be said that your government's information about our trends are unreliable?
No. Sorry, you're asking me if the information that we put out as the Government of Canada is unreliable? No, we put out reliable information.
OK. Donc, on est vraiment pas sur la trajectoire.
Okay, that means we are not on track to meet our 2030 targets per your 2025 report.
I think you can read the 2025 report. You've read our 2026 NIR. It shows where we are in making our progress, moving towards our objectives. But the government is committed to delivering on our 2050 objectives, and we're continuing to do that work, as the minister said.
OK. Est-ce que
Internally, do you assess the impacts of government decisions on emissions? For example, the methane regulations, changes to the clean electricity regulations, industrial carbon pricing being put off to the future, a pipeline that will carry 1 million liters a day. Have you carried out assessments of how this will affect the government's progress towards meeting its goals?
Thanks very much for the question. So we provide ongoing analysis and advice, as we do on all things. There's a distinction between that and then the modeling and reports such as those that we put in December and the NIR. Because as you well know, being very versed and well-versed in this topic, there are interactive effects, there are complexities, and as you spoke to the minister about, that global number is really important. So we have work to do as a number of these decisions are modeled and put together, and we really do have some work to do. So that's what we're working on right now in order to sort of take what has been happening and the decisions that have been made over the past period of time and putting that together so that we can come forward and deliver a comprehensive modeling.
Donc, vous avez dit que vous en avez fait des évaluations.
So you do carry out evaluations. Can you provide them to the committee?
J'ai donné quelques exemples, mais...
Gave some examples.
I'm happy to share the information that we have.
D'accord.
All right. For the various emission reductions measures, which have been modified through the emission reduction plan.
So as I said, we on a measure by measure basis, that's not how we operate. We really look at these things on a global perspective, and so we do look at things on a individual. We talk about them, but we don't have them modeled in the way that I expect that you are looking for them.
Okay. Je dois me dire à suivre là, parce que vous me dites.
I'm having trouble following. You say that you have a general overview, but wouldn't that include the various measures?
Yes, but I think as you were saying earlier when speaking to the minister, there's a distinction between the global number, impact, and trajectories to get to 2050 versus sort of the individual measures and interactive effects. And when we put out our information and share our information, we need to make sure that we are credible in talking about where we're going to go on our path to 2030 and 2050. So that's the work that we have to do. And just as an example, with the update to industrial carbon pricing, there are a number of decisions that still have to be made jurisdiction by jurisdiction on the implementation of the benchmark, and that will all impact what it's going to look like and the impact it will have on the emissions going forward. We need to know that to understand the impacts going forward, and the details matter.
Okay, donc si vous pouvez fournir.
Okay, provide what you can provide, and I will appreciate that. We heard that certain regulations would be weakened, including those surrounding the Impact Assessment Agency. It would have its ability to conduct assessments of pipelines weakened. Could you tell us what that means for the Impact Assessment Agency?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for that question. Certain changes are being proposed through the discussion paper. The goal is not to weaken environmental regulations. It is instead to make our processes more effective.
Comme par exemple?
For example, for pipelines, there will be an environmental assessment. However, the assessment would be carried out by the Canadian Energy Regulator.
les compétences?
Do they have the jurisdiction to do that? Oh, it looks like my time is up. Thank you very much, Mr. Bonin.
Mr. Ross for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to start with Ms. Johnson, please. The Minister was just here talking about the agreement that was signed in my riding, by the way, in Klemtu, or Kitasoo. The older name is Kitasoo. And talking about a conservation land agreement. Quite interesting, one of the provisions there actually speaks to fish farms, open net fish farms. And Kitasoo has had a fish farm for the better part of 30 years. In the context of this agreement, is the idea of the fish farms provision to continue the phase out under Canada's plan to June 30th, 2029, or is it to renegotiate fish farms in the context of Kitasoo's fish farms?
Thank you. I'm actually going to pass this over to my colleague, Mr. Campbell, just on the basis it's a Parks Canada lead. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. I was up in Kitasoo Hayes on the weekend and had the opportunity to talk to lots of people within the community and through the chair. One of the things that we are looking within that area is continued by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. They would continue to have that relationship with Kitasoo on the licensing of the fish farm. So that will continue to go forward as well. The regulations that are in place from Department of Fisheries and Oceans stay the same there. It was an agreement, and I will just start.
So the plan is to continue. The plan is to continue the phase out June 30th, 2029.
The plan is to continue to work through the process that they have with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans.
Okay, to the phase out. Okay, in that respect, in that decision, I mean, back then consent wasn't a big term back then, but now it is. Will Canada be pursuing obtaining consent from Kitasoo to phase out fish farms by 2029?
So it, I think, would be more appropriate if you had that question to go to the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and certainly.
So that's not a conversation for the agreement itself, the conservation agreement.
That is within the conservation agreement, both within the Indigenous Protected and Conservation Area agreement between the Six Nations, not between the Six Nations and the Government of Canada, and the agreement between the Government of Canada, the Government of BC, and the Six Nations. There is an element of that again comes back to the unfettered regulation of the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans to continue that.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm trying to understand the process in terms of fast-tracking or pre-approving a major project, especially a linear project that goes across provincial boundaries, and didn't really get a good answer yet, even though this is the third kick at the can. But really, when we're talking about the fragmented process that we have now between the Major Projects Office, Canadian Impact Assessment Agency, we still don't understand how does Aboriginal rights and title interests get addressed on a one-year approval process under the Major Projects Office? Does that timeline actually coincide with the consultation and accommodation of Aboriginal rights and title for those affected First Nations along a pipeline, for example?
Thank you for the question. I guess maybe we start with just responding to your question about the process itself. It's a I get the process, and I from the third kick at the can, meaning I still haven't got an answer on the process, so I'll just leave that aside and try to decipher what the minister said. But in the context of Aboriginal title, between the Major Projects Office, Canadian Impact Assessment Agency, and the new First Nations hub that they're proposing, will the timeline for consultation and accommodation of Aboriginal rights and title coincide with a fast-track approval or a one-year approval term for approval of major projects? So the government has been clear through these processes its commitment to continue its efforts to consult nations through these processes.
Let me give you a scenario. There's a pre-approval of a project, but you haven't completed the consultation accommodation. You haven't gotten consent yet. does the pre-approval still stand even though you haven't completed the rights and title consultation accommodation process?
That initial decision under C5 would include and be informed by consultations with Indigenous peoples as part of that government decision on whether or not a project can move forward.
But isn't that chicken before the egg? Because you're talking about pre-approval, but you haven't completed the consultation accommodation, you haven't gotten consent. But in that context as well.
Mr. Ross, I'm sorry, your time is up. Did you want to do a quick response to Mr. Ross?
So, as I mentioned, the government would consult on a certain amount of information that's required to support its decision on whether or not a project can move forward. And that would be followed up with further consultations with impacted communities on how best to develop that project to avoid, as much as possible, any impacts on rights, but to mitigate and potentially accommodate any impacts further downstream as we get into those details. So it's built into the process.
We'll now turn to Mr. Watchorn for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and this time I will do my best to share my time with MP Grant. So we had a great conversation, Mr. Fisher, just before the meeting started, a little bit about groundwater. So I'd like to talk about groundwater. As you know, in the last 20 years, a lot of municipalities have transferred their drinking water systems from surface water to groundwater. Now, I'd just like to know how the agency is going to approach the water safety of groundwater, which is capital in my region, how you guys are going to try and make sure that that is taken into account in the strategy.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, thank you for the question. Natural Resources Canada, as you know, is the federal department responsible for the day-to-day management and science with respect to understanding groundwater in Canada. As I mentioned, in the context of floods and droughts, we expect that groundwater will come up in many ways as part of our consultations and discussions around the development of a national water security strategy, and obviously we expect that it will come up with our provincial and territorial partners. So I don't want to sort of prejudge sort of the outcomes of those discussions, but we know that it will be a front and center issue for many Canadians. It is the largest source of fresh water in Canada, and we need to understand how that might change over time as we draw more from groundwater.
Great, thank you. And maybe just for one last question for Mrs. Johnson. My region depends a lot on winter for our economy. And I met with a group called Save Our Winters. I don't know if you've known them. They're made up of advocates and Olympic athletes who are trying to make sure that we're going to be able to ski for the next few years in our region and in Canada. How is our strategy, let's say, on methane or on gas reduction going to help us maintain our economies in places where winter is super important to us?
What a great question. Thank you very much. And I'm a big fan of the winter. What I might do is just pass it over to my colleague, Judy Meltzer, who has really been leading a lot of our work on methane, and just to talk about how this is a really significant and important part of our climate reduction activities. Judy?
Thank you very much for that question, and apologies for my awkward turning. But that's right, we're really pleased. So methane is obviously one of the most effective, low-cost strategies to address climate change. And of course, action on methane, regardless of where emissions are emitted, is going to make a significant impact on addressing climate change, both in the near term and longer term. The government in December released frankly, fairly world-leading enhanced methane regulations for oil and gas, as well as landfill methanes in December as well. And those are going to drive to significant reductions in methane, which are kind of a key part of a broader set of measures, investments, and strategies to tackle climate. Those methane regulations provide a lot of flexibility and pull forward Canadian technologies for abatement in methane, which we're a world leader in. So we're really excited about the regulations and as well negotiating equivalency agreements with provinces. So thanks for the question.
Thank you. And I will pass my time to Mr. Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Watchorn, and thank you all for being here. Mr. Campbell, we heard earlier about the signing of the National Marine Conservation Area Reserve last week between the federal government, the provincial government of British Columbia, Kisuhehe's, Anuhawk, Heltzik, Gatla, and Wikinu, which was a great turnout, which I saw. Could you elaborate what potential this model would have? There's no one size fits all, but what model this model would have in agreements based on mutual collaboration with Indigenous peoples moving forward?
Yeah, thank you very much to the member through the chair. I think one of the things that that Parks Canada has been most proud of, and ourselves as leadership within Parks Canada, and I will say today is my 35th anniversary with the Government of Canada, so I have a little bit of time to be able to talk about that, but when we start to look at what we have done from an Indigenous stewardship perspective and what went on with that agreement, as I said, the underlying agreement was actually an agreement between the Six Nations, which is fairly extraordinary from a conservation perspective. So they first put in place an Indigenous protected and conservation area. Then both the provincial and the federal government are able to bring in federal and provincial law set on top of that in order as well to give it that further protection. I think this model and this model of collaboration is actually the way forward for Canada as we have looked at this as Parks Canada. That's why we have put in a lot on the co-governance side, and every place that we have across the country that is managed by Parks Canada will have a plan of Indigenous stewardship by the end of the next 2 years.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to Monsieur Bonin pour 2.5 minutes.
Mr. Bonin, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't have the time to do so, but I would like to express my compassion for our officials who are well-intentioned and hardworking, and who are now in a situation where the government they are working for has changed direction when it comes to the fight against climate change. So I would just wanted to get that out there. In the 2026-2027 departmental plan, it says that among the initiatives to have their funding cut are the Canada's National Adaptation Strategy. Will this strategy be renewed?
Thank you very much for the question. So we are working on our plan. I believe from the last appearance we shared the list of the sunsetters that were coming forward, and so you have that information. As part of our due course, we look at a series of those, and so we'll be proceeding through sort of our regular federal processes, and adaptation is one of those pieces. So we continue to see a huge opportunity and huge need for the work on adaptation moving forward.
Is there a date for decision to know? Sorry. Pardon.
No. But if there were if I could control those things, it would be delightful. But no, we're continuing to do our work in due course. Thank you.
Looking through the finances for environment and climate change on InfoBase Canada, climate adaptation will have its budget cut by $532 million in 2026-2027 compared to 2024-2025. Back then it was $569 million. It's going down to $37 million. Can you explain this spending cut?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for that question.
Friend Kurt, desperately looking through the numbers. I don't want to waste your time, and so perhaps we could get back to you with the details on that in writing.
D'accord, merci.
Thank you. When will the report on the National Adaptation Plan be published? I thought it was supposed to be this year.
Yes, and so we are working towards that, and I believe that was in 2019. We had committed to coming out with a National Adaptation Strategy this year, so we are working forward on that.
Okay.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Bonin.
Thank you, Mr. Bonin.
For 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Have all the decisions under the expenditure review now been finalized?
So, and happy to turn over to my colleagues. So we have finalized the decisions, and we are in the process of implementing them. So it's a 3-year process, and we are on track for delivering for the first year.
Could I get you to table with this committee the full expenditure review the cut list, not the summary, but the exact programs that have been cut, the dollar amounts cut, the locations that have been affected, the positions affected, and whether each cut affects science or forecasting or enforcement or regulations or grants or contributions or what exactly it's aimed at. The trouble with this main or supplementary estimates is they're grouped together. It's very difficult to understand what's actually happening until some stakeholder comes out and says, wow, this is gone. And so I would love if our committee could actually see in detail what all of these changes are. Would you be willing to table that now that the decisions have been made?
I'm not trying to be cagey by any stretch of the imagination, but I would like to make sure that I'm considering sort of the people who are involved, the programs are involved, and those sorts of things. So perhaps I could get back to you on how I can respond to that.
Okay, well, was that a commitment to at least try? I mean, you understand what we're aiming for here. I'd love to know what exactly is not just a grouping of one fund has now been reduced over $7 million in the next 3 years. Like, that doesn't mean anything to really anybody, right?
Absolutely, and I completely understand. And I also think, there is a challenge of perception and views of what has happened and has not happened. And I think we have a shared interest in being able to be very clear about what the impact of decisions are, why they have been made, and what the opportunities are as we go forward.
I hope you take the opportunity to explain why that change in funding isn't going to make a consequential difference. I think it's an opportunity to highlight why these changes are being made.
I share your view.
Thank you. Now, in advance of moving over to the discussion document on the major project side of things, I assume that there was a lot of homework done as to why these changes are now being proposed within that. Is that correct? You tried to understand what exactly needs to change for the Impact Assessment Agency to actually enable projects to be built?
There's ongoing efforts to continue to improve our approach and our processes and ongoing engagement and consultation to support that. And this is a product of learnings, yes.
So within that document, the discussion paper, it says that major projects would often take more than 5 years to receive federal decisions needed to begin construction. I'm curious what evidence led you to that timeline of 5 years.
I can't speak to the specific timeline in that paper, but presumably some sort of average of what it's taken both proponents and governments to review projects.
Recognizing I've got you a little on the spot here, I'm hoping you would be willing if I could send in some written questions that are kind of more specific along that analysis that has been done in the lead up to this discussion, if you'd be willing to table the responses with this committee.
We would be happy to work with colleagues.
Okay, awesome. Now, more generally, I suppose back to ECCC, if the government is proposing these reforms now, is it safe to say that it's been accepted the status quo is not working in terms of building major projects in this country?
So maybe just reflecting on that question, I think what we are spending a lot of time thinking about is the difference between the what and the how. So when we think about the what, in terms of the environmental protections, the things that we are trying to do, like the things that we have obligations as a ministry to do, that's not changing. The how, there's a lot of opportunity in how we do our business to improve. So we think about improving how we permit, improving how we work with our partners, being more efficient, more effective. Like that's where we have some opportunities, but the protections themselves, the what, that remains core.
That. Now, within the paper, it proposes giving Cabinet limited power to exempt specific projects from the Species at Risk Act jeopardy test. What problem is that exemption proposed trying to solve?
Over to you, my friend.
So the jeopardy test, what that requires is it's a scientific assessment whether you can fully mitigate the impacts on a species. It's recovery or it's survival, and there's two tests under Sarah, and I could provide you more detail, but I won't because I know you have limited time. So it is like essentially a potential valve where if you can't meet the jeopardy test, after pursuing a number of, you follow the mitigation hierarchy, you avoid, you mitigate, you take all measures, it would allow, in an exceptional circumstance, the potential for a permit. But again, it's a theoretical situation. We've never seen that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leslie. We'll now turn to Mr. Millett for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will be sharing my time with MP Greaves. Yes, I will. I promise. My question is for Mr. Fisher. Mr. Fisher, the estimates for 2026-2027 include a transfer payment to the Canada Water Agency of about $42 million in support of freshwater stewardship. And can you share with us examples of the projects, some of the projects funded in the freshwater ecosystem initiatives, for instance, or in any way any of these initiatives?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. Again, thank you for the question. With respect, I'll actually start with the question that you raised to the Minister about the area of concern in the Bay of Quinte. As you may know, there are 43 areas of concern that are shared between the United States, well, total within the Great Lakes Basin. 12 of them are Canadian, 5 of them are binational. So they're, Detroit River is a great example. So the Bay of Quinte is one of those areas of concern, as you know, we've been tackling for a very, very long time. I'm pleased to say that we've completed all actions with respect to the beneficial use impairments, which is very positive. I'd say most actions have been completed, and then we'll move into assessing the recovery of those impaired ecosystems and putting that on a pathway to delisting. So that's one concrete example that we're doing through the Freshwater Action Plan. As you know, in Budget 2023, we announced, or the government announced, $420 million over 10 years to really try and accelerate that work. So restoration is a big part of that, in addition to looking at how we're tackling toxic and nuisance algae throughout the system, looking at coastal resiliency, and also working with our Indigenous partners to make sure that they're more directly engaged with Great Lakes stewardship and governance. So those are just some examples in your own backyard where we're putting that investment to use.
Very much appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. And I yield my time. Mr. Greaves?
Thank you very much, colleague, and good afternoon to our witnesses. Thank you for joining us today. My question is for Mr. Campbell and Parks Canada. Thank you for being with us today. As you are aware, my home riding of Victoria is one of the great destinations in this country, receiving more than 1 million visitors a year to explore the best of our region. That includes a number of national parks and national historic sites as well. I'm wondering if Parks Canada has data from last year about the effect of the Canada Strong Pass in terms of attendance at those kinds of sites and parks, not necessarily specific to Victoria, though that would be welcome, but more broadly, what impact did that program have on attendance for Parks Canada?
Yeah, and in my trying to remember everything, knowing every place and how much they went up, I am not able to do. But I would say across the country, Parks Canada had 26 million visitors last year, slightly over 26 million visitors to our places. An increase of about 9% in national parks and an increase of over 20% in national historic sites. The national historic site in one of the major national historic sites in the Victoria area was, in fact, one of those places that had well over the 20%. We as well had increased visitation in the past year in the Gulf Islands National Park in your area. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's certainly, again, substantive. And I will say across the country, a number that we do like to talk about is that number of visitors end up contributing to the Canadian tourism economy $16 million per day.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and we see those effects in our region every day. Relatedly, in the context of the government's 30 by 30 conservation targets, national parks and national urban parks play an important role in increasing access for Canadians to natural spaces and conservation areas. I'm wondering if you could speak to the process of establishing those new national urban parks, and in particular, the way in which Parks Canada interacts with Indigenous nations and communities whose territories may be implicated by those projects.
Absolutely, and one of the projects that I am most proud of in my own career is the Rouge National Urban Park. And the very first thing that we did in establishing of that national park was set up an Indigenous roundtable. that's become the gold standard for how we do Indigenous parks or national urban parks across the country, is to first set up an Indigenous roundtable. Within that process, of course, it's the municipality, it's the province, it's the Indigenous people, all of us working together in order to look at how we can contribute. We have conservation authorities at the provincial level as well. We've had some universities that have come on board to look at their land, and then that gets all assembled under a process that certainly has all of the groups that I had talked about as contributing members to cooperative management.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
As we still have a few minutes remaining and all of these expert witnesses, I propose that we do 3 minutes per party for one last round, if there's no objection. We will proceed. Okay, so I will begin with Mr. Leslie for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Going back to the discussion paper, could a federal economic zone be used to advance a project over the objection of a provincial government?
I guess it all depends, but the answer probably no. If there's provincial jurisdiction involved in these projects, we would work in cooperation and collaboration with provincial partners. A good example of work in this space I would point to is the regional assessments that we have done offshore Nova Scotia, Newfoundland and Labrador, kind of working through the joint management regimes to assess common issues, doing it on a regional basis, and putting in place standardized mitigation measures and approaches that support faster downstream individual project decisions. And so it's kind of an approach that we're looking to replicate with willing partners across the country moving forward.
Willing partners seems like an interesting point there. Obviously, there's some discussion between the provinces regarding a pipeline to the Pacific coast right now, and I think very specific, purposeful language in the discussion document that I assume is intentional as part of spurring that discussion. It's something I think we should be aware of, that I hope people will be giving comment to, particularly those in BC, that I obviously want to see a pipeline going through there, but the federal government creating this, I think, could be problematic. So I'm curious if you could report back over time what that turns into through the consultation. But Madam Chair, I would like to move the motion that I tabled on Tuesday verbally regarding a request to the Prime Minister's office regarding the letter that was discussed in the media from CBC Radio Canada over 14 Liberal MPs sending their concerns with the government's environmental policy direction to the Prime Minister. Now, this is a group of elected members of Parliament raising concerns with their Prime Minister about environmental policies. And if those concerns are serious enough to put into writing to the Prime Minister, and I assume be leaked by one or more members from that group, I believe they are serious enough for the members of this committee to see, because members of Parliament have a duty to be open and honest with the Canadians who sent us here. I'm very open and honest about what my criticisms and concerns are with government environmental policies. Each and every day I get the pleasure of sitting around this particular table and in the House of Commons. And if Liberal MPs are privately warning the Prime Minister that his government is backsliding on the environment, Canadians deserve to know exactly what those concerns are, especially given that they're coming from members of the Liberal caucus. Now, the Environment Committee exists to examine these very issues. We can't do our job properly if relevant concerns from members of the governing caucus, those who should know the most about what the actual policies are being undertaken behind the scenes are kept secret simply because they are politically inconvenient for the government of the day. This is about accountability. Liberal MPs can't just say one thing privately to the Prime Minister and another thing publicly to their constituents. In my view, Canadians deserve to know where their elected representatives stand, especially on questions as consequential as pipelines, major projects, economic development, and the future of Canada's entire regulatory system. Now, Madam Chair, sunlight matters, and if these concerns are legitimate, as I assume they are, they should be aired publicly. And if the government disagrees with them, it can explain exactly why. But keeping them secret serves only one purpose, and that is protecting the government from political embarrassment. And I assume that is why this letter was leaked by one of the signatories, and that is not good enough simply to protect yourselves politically. Canadians have a right to know what concerns are being raised inside the government about its own environmental agenda. And given we are in the Environment Committee, perhaps there's signatories within this room, I hope that we take this opportunity to pass this motion, bring this issue to light, and see what the specific concerns of the 14 signatories are regarding this letter sent to the Prime Minister. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie. Mr. Grant.
Madam Chair, we have important witnesses here today, and we have a number of members who would like to continue asking their questions, as we did extend this meeting for 3 minutes each. This motion is not a subject of this meeting today, and I think we should continue in our scheduled business. So, therefore, I'm moving to adjourn this debate.
To adjourn the debate.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, I have my hand up.
Thank you. We can't debate a deleterious motion, Monsieur Bonnet, but you may now speak.
Non, mais il me semblait important d'intervenir avant que.
I wanted to weigh in before the vote took place about an important topic which directly impacts our party. As summarized by my Conservative colleague, there was this important letter sent out by 14 Liberals to the Prime Minister. The letter is in the public interest, and a number of media outlets have written about it. Sorry, Mr. Bonin, we cannot debate dilatory motions, so we will have to press on.
A few minutes remaining, so I think we will now turn to the Liberal side, to Mr. Grant, to continue with the witnesses for 3 minutes. Merci beaucoup.
Ma main était levée avant le vote.
Yes, but I had my hand up before the vote. My hand was up before the vote.
No.
Bah oui.
Oui.
Yes, it was. We already gave the floor to Mr. Grant, whose hand was up first. That's how the process works.
Madame, je crois que vous avez.
I don't think you saw I had my hand up, Chair, because my Conservative colleague spoke about the motion, and as soon as he started speaking, I had my hand up.
Mais je suis certain que sur la.
I'm sure if you play back the video, you will notice that my hand was up from the very moment that my Conservative colleague proposed the motion. And also, this is not a new motion. This motion was moved on Tuesday. It has to do with an important letter, which our committee is seized with.
Standing, and we can definitely follow up with procedure with the clerk after this, but we're going to continue now. Thank you. Mr. Grant.
Mr. Fisher, on World Water Day earlier this year, the minister announced that we're going to launch Canada's National Water Security Strategy. This is a significant milestone, obviously. Could you speak to what the strategy will mean for Canadians and how the Canada Water Agency intends to work with provinces, territories, Indigenous partners to develop it in a way that will fully diversify the full diversity of water challenges across the country?
Yep. Chair, I'd like to thank the member for the question. Also want to thank this committee for deliberating and issuing the freshwater study this morning. Obviously, we haven't had a chance to look at that yet, but we understand that it's comprehensive and there are many recommendations, and that will certainly serve as an important input, as we start our conversations with Canadians about how we collectively think about water security today and in the future. When I've traveled the country over the last year, I've spoken to farmers and irrigators who are concerned about access to water for growing more healthy food. Industry in terms of power production, and water for industrial processes, mayors and municipalities. There's certainly increasing interest across the country in terms of how we connect with water every day, both for our environment but also for our economic competitiveness. So those will be an important aspects as we start this conversation. And I think just recognizing that provinces and territories play a primary responsibility for managing water resources in Canada alongside the federal government. We've initiated early dialogues with our partners, and there's certainly increased interest in having that discussion with us in terms of how do we build a more water secure and water resilient future. So to the member's question, we certainly look forward to undertaking those discussions over the next year, and obviously with his support as the parliamentary secretary.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Johnson. With another COP approaching later this year, Canada has an important role to play in advancing multilateral climate ambition. Are you able to speak to how ECCC is positioning Canada to be a climate leader on the world stage?
Thanks very much. So there are a lot of things that we do that we will do better for working with other jurisdictions. Right now, about 30% of the world is covered by industrial carbon pricing. As we think about our trade agenda and our build agenda, market access is increasingly going to be determined by how we are considering carbon pricing in our market, but also in how we work with others. India, China, both considering that. So that's one thing we need to be doing. We're working with the European Union. We have an upcoming MOCA meeting. So there are a number of steps that we're taking to try and do that. Nature, as we've been talking about as well, I mean, that's a totally different COP. But, I mean, given the size of Canada, our ability to meet our 30 by 30 goals and our laser focus on achieving that, like where Canada goes, so goes the rest of the world. Like it's only like just by a sheer scale of our size. So the work that we do, the partnerships that we build, and the momentum that we're able to build to line up with others, it really matters. And so we have to be thoughtful about how we do our work, and we continue to do that, but we will be spending a lot of time. The one other one I would mention, I see my time is up, is on methane as well. And again, it is both about the emissions reduction, but also huge economic opportunities for companies who are building the abatement technology as well. So pause there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grant. We'll now turn to Monsieur Bonin pour 3 minutes. Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question. My understanding was that there were budget cuts of roughly $1.2 billion, roughly 96% of the budget for measures related to population growth and climate change. Could you break down these budget cuts?
Pardon me, so 96% for climate change?
Clean growth, rather.
C'est en français, là, donc...
Sorry, I was speaking in French. It's all good, all good. I just wanted to make sure that my understanding was correct. 1.2 billion. That was one of the sunsetters. As the minister noted,
it does show that we have about a 45% reduction year over year in our budget. There are a number of programs that I expect that the committee will have an opportunity to review as part of supplementary estimates A and future estimates, just owing to the timelines of decisions. So we expect some of those pieces will be coming forward.
Et vous avez mentionné que
you also mentioned that, according to your remarks, Canada is a climate leader. I don't think I agree with that. Could you tell us, because you seem to think we're an international leader, could you tell us, if we're drawing comparisons, what country has been doing worse than Canada in the past year, given all the backsliding, which led to the resignation of a former environment minister? I know that as deputy ministers, you do not represent the government, but could you talk about something that Canada did better than other G7 countries in the past year?
So perhaps we're thinking about or framing the issue a little bit differently, but I think where Canada is demonstrating leadership is that we are an energy-producing nation. We are committed to a net zero by 2050, and we are dealing with but we are dealing with a complexity that other jurisdictions in the G7 are not dealing with as energy. I understand that the lens through which you are looking at, but participating in international conversations as we try and talk about applying carbon pricing, as we try to talk about methane reductions and how we do it in a way that is durable through this moment, those are the things that we as Canada are doing.
That doesn't answer my question. That does not answer my question. Mr. Bonin, your time is up. That's a shame.
Thank the witnesses for their time today and ask now if it's the pleasure of the committee to proceed to voting on the main estimates, as we need to do. So witnesses, you may be excused at your leisure. Thank you. And so, shall vote 1 under Canada Water Agency, less the amounts voted in interim supply carry. The amount is $26,020,103.25. Mr. Leslie.
In an effort to save us time for whether dermatological testing or RibFest, could we pass these on division by chance?
Option? If there's unanimous consent, we can do it all at once. Monsieur Bonin, c'est d'accord aussi avec toi? Okay. So how do I phrase that?
So you vote is a motion for the committee to adopt all of the votes on division.
All right then. Is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt all of the votes listed on division? Any opposed? Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.